Good evening, and welcome to another episode of The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Perry.
And I'm your host, David. Tonight we're talking about Season 7, Episode 6, Treachery, Faith, and the Great River. Before we continue, you can find us on Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube as The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast.
That is correct. And as I say every single week, you should find us and follow us because we're great. We're awesome. We're a good time. And barring technical difficulties or mental lapses, I think we bring some interesting little points here to this 30 plus year old show that we enjoy so much. So, as David said, tonight we, of course, are talking about the sixth episode of seventh season. I can't believe we're already so deep into the seventh season. But yeah, I mean, here we are. So we've
Yeah.
made it through. We're almost to the end. So one could say we've had faith of the heart to keep it going. That's another Trek reference there. Sorry, my eyes are kind of, I don't know, they're like stinging for some reason. So I don't know what's going on there. But anyway, before we dive into the episode tonight, let's give, of course, go our little weekly check in. So, David, how has your week been?
Week's been good, a little eventful in the stuff that I've done, seen over the week. For example, finished season 2 of Severance this week. Severance season 2 is fantastic. It's definitely got a different flavor to it than season 1. It's not a bad thing, you're moving the story along, but yeah, it was a pretty important finale. A great show, really enjoying that. Um, I read Agatha Christie's Endless Night as a book this week. Smaller book, one of her mystery stories again. Part of a compendium of 3 novels that I've been reading. Like 10 Little Indians, and then there were none, as it was as they call it now. And then what was the other one? I forget the other one at the moment. But Endless Night was the one I read this week, and I'll give a minor spoiler only in that this one, I knew that there was something going on because the murder doesn't happen until like 2/3 of the way through the book. And the narrator is clearly, I knew it was the narrator, basically what I'm getting at. The narrator of this one is the murderer. It was just too like, what's going on? There's like, it wasn't all that enjoyable. I'll say of all of her books, this one was not like, oh wow, this is great. It was kind of dreary because it like takes forever for the plot to get going, and then when it finally does happen, shortly then it's revealed that the main character, the narrator, was he's an unreliable narrator, and he's been uh, not telling the whole story the whole time, and he's the one who actually did the murder. So fun little novel in its own way, but not one I'm planning on returning to anytime soon. But part of the reason I mentioned that I figured it might be the narrator that was the one who did it is because there is another Agatha Christie book. I don't remember the plot much at all, and I'm pretty sure it's one of the Hercule Poirot novels. So where Hercule Poirot shows up as the detective who solves the murder. I'm pretty sure there's one of those where the narrator is also the murderer. And I remember that one being like the one time I ever got it right as a kid, being like, this narrator is sus. I'm just going to guess it's the narrator. And then I was right. And I remember being proud of myself at the time. Um, and so now that I finished that, I started reading Citizen Soldiers, which is basically the follow up to D Day, Stephen E. Ambrose's D Day book. Again, the one who wrote Band of Brothers. Citizen Soldiers is basically about the war after the D Day invasion up through Hitler's downfall. But he makes the point of being like, this is not so much about like strategy and how the war went. It's supposed to be more like about how the experience was for the men on the ground. Like, what was their version of events? How did they tell the story in subsequent interviews? It's not about giving you the nitty gritty overall detail, like the strategy and tactics and who's this and who's that, but what was it like for the men on the ground? So I started that one. Looking forward to reading that. And then yeah, this past weekend I was at a friend's birthday party. He and his wife got a group of friends together, and we went out to an Airbnb out in the countryside and Spent 2 nights out there. It was a nice little Airbnb place with a pool and enough room to, you know, I love board games, so played a bunch of board games and karaoke and all kinds of fun stuff. Got back today, and yeah, that was me. A pretty busy week for me. How about you?
Mine wasn't nearly as busy, I don't think, anyway. Obviously work and workouts are my new constant. But in addition to that, I stopped all of the other extra stuff that I had been doing to really kind of focus on the Federalist Papers and Tiamat's Wrath, the eighth book in the Expanse series.
Mm,
I'm just past the halfway point in that book now,
mm,
and I'm really enjoying it. So I think I'm going to like put the Federalist Papers aside so that I can finish this book. I've just it's given me everything that I want. Like no spoilers to you, but it's given me everything that I've been wanting when I was saying, even from the show standpoint, I want more proto molecule. I want to know more, this kind of
mhm.
stuff. It's giving you more. It gives you
Good.
much more. So I've really been enjoying that. So I think I'm gonna just go that route, finish the book out, and just be done
Mm,
here soon. So, in addition to that, I started going through the Call of Duty game series. I think we talked about this before as
mhm,
well, and trying to just kind of figure out what the overall storyline is. Like, I love a good story with a game.
mhm.
Some of my favorite games have very complex storylines that you can really um,
Get
just get
into.
behind and enjoy. Like yeah, Call of Duty is one. The Mass Effect series is another one. God of War, the Uncharted series. All these I feel like have really great storylines, along with a lot of great graphics too. So if you can find those two in a game, I'm there for it. So doing that, and then last night for some reason, like it was I guess a combination of just perfect events of not being able to sleep and not having anything to do that I was interested in anyway, and started watching like just random movies of things that I'd like heard about and hadn't seen or whatever. So I ended up watching a movie called Monster Hunter, which has Mila Jovovich in it.
Based on the
From
game. Yep.
Well, see, and I didn't know it was a game.
Mhm.
I just, was watching the movie because it was on Hulu and it was recommended. So I watched it, and it was so funny because I'm watching it and I'm going, this dialogue kind of sucks, but it kind of reminds me of a game. And then like some characters show up. I'm like, you know what? That character would probably do better as a game character than as whatever. And then this other character shows up, highly stylized. Even the hair was ridiculous. Like his hair never moves. Like in everything that's going on, it never moves. And I was like, that's like quintessential game graphics rendering. They never change. And that's what I kept thinking the whole time. And then like three-fourths of the way through the movie, a commercial comes on, and it's for the new game that's just come out for that series. And I
Nice.
was like, oh, okay, there we go.
There you go.
Um, so I watched that. I watched Alien Romulus,
Mm.
which is, I believe, the latest movie in the Alien series.
Came out like 6 months ago or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's very new. It's got a um, I wouldn't necessarily call them teenagers, but they're a much younger group. And if you haven't seen that movie, I would recommend it. I think it's a great entry into the Alien family. To me, it was like kind of like watching the first Alien movie. Like if you've never seen an Alien movie, this would be a great one for you to watch. If
Right.
you've never seen a single Alien movie and you're just kind of getting into it now, it's like because it's all new characters. It's a new way to kind of introduce the overall lore of the world that Alien exists in,
Right.
and what stuff is, and it gives you enough clues and there's enough callbacks to old stuff that I think it does a great job of building the suspense, who the enemy is, and making you curious about other stuff within the world. And then, of course, as soon as I finished that movie, there were the recommendations for all of the other Alien movies and stuff. So I don't know if I ever watched Prometheus, which I think is the one that came out before this one.
Prometheus came out almost, gosh, over like 10 years ago now. It's supposed to be like a prequel. Like, it's supposed to kind of
Yeah.
explain like how things came to be for the first Alien. And it had some interesting stuff, but like it kind of flubbed. Like it had a
Hmm.
rocky go. And then they had another one. It was a sequel to that, um, which was called, that one was called, I forgot what it was called, Covenant or something like that. I don't know. But yeah, there's been several in the last several years, but Romulus was the newest one. It's like 6, 8 months ago that it came out. I haven't seen it, but I know the plot.
Yeah.
I don't care for horror movies myself all that much, but I'm always fascinated with like
Oh
reading the
well,
plot synopsis. So I know the plot synopsis, but I haven't seen the actual movie.
so maybe that's what it gets like. I mean, you're absolutely right. It is a horror movie, but for me, I wasn't watching it as a horror movie. I was watching it as a sci-fi movie,
Yeah.
and I was critiquing like the sci-fi elements of the movie
Mhm.
and found a lot of that really enjoyable. And then of course, what I could remember from when I watched Aliens, years ago. Like I've never sat down and been like, "Oh, let's watch Alien again." I saw it the first time when I was however old when it first came out,
Right.
and I've never watched it since, but it got me interested because like I said, I like a good story and I know there's an overlap with Alien and Predator and I saw some of those, and so again, it just got me thinking. I was like, I think what I would like to do is kind of like what I've done with a lot of different things is sit down, figure out what the order and timeline is for all of them, and then watch them in the movie universe order, not in release order, because I know that they don't match. Because there are
Right.
so many of the movies that have been like you said, there's prequels, and then there's parts that are kind of like offshoots that don't really have anything to do with
Yeah. Alien
some of the
versus
main
Predator.
story. Yeah, and so, I just wanna kind of, figure that out and watch those and just kinda know the universe as it stands,
Mhm.
now. And then another movie that I watched, which I found really interesting, also another sci-fi movie, it was called 65, and it's,
Oh yeah.
the Adam Driver movie where he is um, a starship pilot who crash lands on a random rogue planet, which turns out to be Earth, but it's Earth 65 million years ago when dinosaurs were around. And so
Right.
he is seemingly the sole survivor, and he, is debating whether or not to even send a message, a distress call for rescue. But then he finds that somebody else has survived, and now it's a it's a we've got we there is a reason for a rescue here. Meanwhile,
Right.
they're battling it out with dinosaurs and the elements and everything else on Earth. I thought it was a pretty well done movie for what it was. Like, you don't have um, a human element as
Mhm.
your main adversary. Your adversary is, the environment itself and the dinosaurs and various other creatures and stuff that are around during that particular era, you
Right.
know. And yeah, it was an interesting way to tell really kind of a sad story because the main character in it, yeah, well, because the main character in it, like the whole reason that he even went and took this mission was his kid is dying and needs this medicine that could potentially cure, but it's incredibly expensive. So he takes this last mission to pay for the medicine that she needs, but the trip is going to take him away from her for
Right.
at least 2 years.
Right.
So it's like it's a sacrifice. I don't want to miss out on your life, but if I don't do this, I'm not gonna have the money to keep you alive anyway.
Right.
So I do it, and then he crash lands, and yeah,
Right. Yeah.
trouble ensues. So I mean, have you seen it?
I have. That's the
Okay,
one I've seen of the three you've described. Um, I've seen that
yeah,
one. That one I remember the dinosaurs, like they try and like make them not quite dinosaurs as we know them. Like
yeah,
they're
yeah.
like
There's a lot of
alienish.
them. Yeah, there's a lot of them that like when you first see them, you think you recognize them,
Right.
but then the more you see of them, the more you're like, I don't think I've ever heard of that dinosaur before.
Yeah.
I mean, now there are some that are unmistakable, like when the T Rex shows up, oh, that's T Rex, But yeah, there were several others, and then there were like other bug things, insects, slugs, and whatever else that I'd never heard of described before
Yeah, it's
science
like
ever.
they tried to like sci-fi their own sci-fi movie. Like
Yeah,
it was like you guys didn't have to, I don't think. But
yeah. I
I mean,
mean,
what do I know?
your premise is good enough that, I mean, you're dealing with a concept that would inherently be alien because no one was around 65 million years ago. So you can, I mean, I know in theory you can kind of do whatever you want, but at the same time, it's like you don't have to go that far.
Right,
So, and I wish to a certain degree they had done more to make it him against the world as it was back then,
right,
because we know that the world has changed a lot over the intervening millions of years or whatever.
right.
So if they had done a little bit more to show like that kind of harshness, not um some of the other choices they made, I think I would have enjoyed that a little bit more. But it is what it is. Like I said, I still think it was an overall enjoyable movie. I like Adam Driver. I haven't seen him in much, but everything that I have seen him in, I've enjoyed. So there's that.
Yeah, I think Adam Driver has been kind of like cursed by strange movie choices. Like 65 million or 65 is like a movie that like wasn't quite a hit. Like it was kind of a hit, and like he was in that movie last year. I forget the name of it, Megalopolis or something. Which like it's Francis Ford Coppola's biggest movie he's ever made, but it's a box office flop. It starred Adam Driver. Like he's a guy who like he's almost there, but like something isn't
You know,
quite like clicking yet.
I don't remember what this movie was called, but it's one of the first movies I ever saw him in, and I thought he was great. And it's a period movie. Um, which I say that, but it was like set in the 70s or 80s or something like that. And he plays a FBI or CIA agent, and they're trying to infiltrate the Ku Klux Klan.
Hmm.
And so he's like helping like with setting up the spyware and everything else. And he's not the star, but he is very much a part of the supporting cast and everything like that. So when he is in the movie, it's like he has great scenes. I think he does just a great job. And I think that's why I really enjoy him so much, because like all the stuff they did in that movie was great. And then another movie I watched with him recently with it had a all-star cast. Jason Bateman's in it. Now I'm Dax Shepard, Jane Fonda, and Tina Fey. They're all in it. I think it's called "This Is Where I Leave You," and
Okay.
it's about how and Adam Driver's in it, and so it's about how all of them are siblings except Jane Fonda's the mother, obviously, and their father dies. And so they all come back for the funeral, and it's kind of like some of them haven't really talked to each other a whole lot, so they're kind of
Right.
reacquainting themselves. And he plays kind of the more extreme brother, the one that couldn't quite get everything together,
Mm,
and again, I think that he was just hilarious throughout that whole movie. So it's I think it's worth watching. It's got some rom com elements. There's a significant amount of drama. It's also quite funny. I mean, again, with that cast, there's no way they're not going to do some kind of comedy. So yeah, I would recommend that one as well. It's
right.
available pretty much everywhere. So.
Okay.
But we're not here to talk about all of those things. We are here to talk about Star Trek Deep Space Nine. And now that we're 20 minutes in, we really should get to the episode. Okay. I will do the recap on this one. You did it last week,
Yeah,
and I'll
go
try
for
to
it.
keep this brief.
Yeah.
So again, the episode is Treachery, Faith in the Great River, sixth episode of the seventh season, and this one is pretty straightforward to a certain degree. This episode shows it starts with Kira and Odo. Odo's giving Kira a massage, and they're just kind of enjoying the moment, being a couple. And then he's basically like, they're talking about how they were playing spring ball, and that's what's got her hurt and why he's giving her a massage and everything else. And then he's like, "Well, I'm gonna be gone for a few days. I've got to go pick up a former informant of mine, this Cardassian informant he used to have, who has gone silent for the past year, and now he's making contact again. And Odo wants to, extract him. He
Mhm.
was apparently his most trusted informant that he ever had during the days of the occupation. So he feels like he kind of owes him, I guess.
Right.
So, meanwhile, while that's going on, our B story is the station apparently is getting a massive number of upgrades. You know, the chief and Nog are all over the station. We see wires and stuff everywhere, and it looks like they're trying to either fix stuff or upgrade stuff or some combination thereof. And while they're doing all that, Cisco walks up to them and he's like, you know, hey, I know you're busy, but the Defiant needs its graviton something or another replaced, repaired, whatever. I don't want the crew getting sick, and we're getting ready to go out on patrol. And he's like, "Well, I've been trying to get that done, but it's going to take about a week before I can get the part you need." And Cisco's like, "Yeah, no, 3 days, bro. I'm going to Bejor. Got stuff got to handle there. When I get back, I expect the Defiant to be ready so we can go out on patrol." And O'Brien's like, "Well, I don't know if that's possible." And Cisco's like, "That sounds like a you problem to me, Chief." And then just, uh, walks off. To which Nog is like, "Well, there may be a way that we can, get what you need." And he convinces Odo, not Odo, but he convinces O'Brien to give him carte blanche to figure out a solution to their graviton emitter problem.
Right.
So while he's working on things, Nog begins to make a series of deals, trades, and so forth in order to get them what they need. He makes friends with the sector quartermaster, who apparently is this guy who works for the Federation, who manages the shipping around of supplies, spare parts, and so forth. And basically, everybody is put on a list. But if you can ingratiate yourself to said dude, he may be willing to, give you what you need sooner. So
Right.
now Nog is doing trades with this person and that person, and everybody wants a little something or another in order to get them what they want. But while he's doing all these trades, he's inconveniencing other people along the way. He ends up, the Captain Cisco's desk gets taken. He takes Martok's blood wine. He borrows a runabout,
Mhm.
all using Chief O'Brien's authorization, of
Mhm.
course.
Mhm.
And a few other things that he does. Basically, while he's maneuvering, O'Brien is the one catching the brunt of everybody's ire behind all these things because, they find his authorization code on all of the manifests for everything that's been signed and shipped and transported and so forth.
Right.
So they're coming after him, looking for him to rectify said situation. Gets down to the wire a little bit, especially once Martok is and the blood wine that's missing is involved. But finally, just before Cisco returns to the station, his desk is back, the blood wine is back, the shuttle is back, and the
Graviton.
graviton emitter thing that they needed for the Defiant has arrived, and and O'Brien tells Cisco it'll take him 8 hours to install. To which, of course, Cisco says, "You've got two. Get it done."
Right.
So that's our B story. I just wanted to explain that one really quick. And then, of course, back to our A story. Odo goes to meet with the missing Cardassian informant that he had, whose name was Gul Rasol, by the way.
Mhm.
Goes to meet with him, arrives. Turns out Gul Rasol is not there. It's Wayun 5 or 6.
No, 6. Yeah.
It's Wayun 6. And so we know that the Vorta are clones, and Wayun 6 has basically, he tells Odo that he has come to feel that the founders and their campaign against the Alpha Quadrant is wrong. Mainly because it should have ended a long time ago, but because it hasn't, he has the ability, he's come to realize something must be, wrong here. So now
Right.
he wants to defect, and he feels like there's no one he would better defect to than Odo, the only god who is on the other side.
Right.
Odo, of course, doesn't believe him, but while they start to talk, he at least is like tentatively, we can at least make our way back to the station. On their way back to the station, the runabout, they're contacted by Wayun 7 and Damar. And Wayun 7 informs Odo that Wayun 6 is defective and he should have killed himself because all Vorta are equipped with an ability to kill themselves.
Mhm.
But because he hasn't, it's further evidence of his
Effectiveness.
defection.
Yeah. Because Wayun 5.
Was the pinnacle Wayun, but
Yeah.
he died under suspicious circumstances, to which we're left to intimate that Damar had something to do with it.
Right.
Um, So now they order a Jem'Hadar strike team to take down the runabout, but thanks to Wayne Six's knowledge of the Dominion's ships, they're able to defeat that ship and keep on moving. Now, it's important to note that the Jem'Hadar on board said ships that are being sent after them have not been told who's on board because they know that if they tell them, there's no way the Jem'Hadar would fire on the ship because Odo is a founder who they believe is a god, so they would
Right.
never destroy it. So basically, Damar convinces Wayun Seven to not tell anybody who's on the ship, so that way they can just blow it up. Um, at one point, it seems like they're almost caught when the female founder comes into the main office room or whatever, and she's asking, who's on board the ship that they're tracing and everything else. And they just kind of obfuscate that a little bit. But we also notice that something is not quite right with the female founder. Her face looks very
Pockmarked.
cakey and dried
Yeah.
out, very craggly. Damar does make a comment about it, to which she seems to fix herself and go back to looking all smooth and stuff
Mhm.
again. She demands that the temperature in the room in all the rooms be lowered by 15 degrees, and storms out. On the runabout, Odo and Wayun Six have taken refuge in a asteroid field, an ice asteroid field. They've parked themselves in between a couple of very large asteroids, and then turned off all the power, which of course makes everything really cold. And they're trying to hide out and hope that the Jem'Hadar move on. The Jem'Hadar don't move on. They just are like, well, screw it. We'll just start shooting everything because they know that they're in there,
Right.
so they start shooting at everything, blowing them up, which makes them have to take a run for it or make a run for it. They try, don't get very far, to which finally Wayne
6
Six decides he doesn't
calls
want, since he
7.
doesn't want Odo to die, he calls Wayne Seven and Damar, and they watch as he activates his neural implant to kill himself. And once he dies, they call off the Jem'Hadar strike team and let Odo return to Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, they don't want a changeling god to die, so Odo is allowed to live. However, before that Wayun 6 dies, he gives
He
us
gets
some vital
Odo's blessing,
information.
and
Well,
he
he gets his
does give us some
blessing.
vital information. He does.
Yes.
So that was the whole point. That was the whole reason that Odo was even really interested in doing this, was because Wayne Six had a bunch of information really about the Dominion and their operations, and that was going to be a really big, kind of cash cow for the Federation. However, since he's dying, that's not going to happen. But before all that happens, he does give us one crucial piece of information, which is the founders are dying. There is a sickness that is running through them. And while they're trying to manage it, they're not having much success. And this has in turn made them a bit desperate. Odo does take this information, of course, back to Deep Space Nine. He tells Kira, which we're assuming he probably told Cisco too. But it also makes Odo incredibly sad because he realizes that his people are dying. He's
Right.
fine, but they're dying. So, and as he says, no matter what happens, no matter who wins or loses the war, I lose. Basically, meaning, if the Federation wins, his people are going to die. And even if his people win, they're still going to die.
Right.
Doesn't seem to be a cure for it. And he'd be the only shapeshifter left.
Correct. And to be clear, that's part of the reason why Wayun 6 defected to Odo. He was saying, you're going to have to take over the Dominion, change the way the Dominion is run, but you'll also be the only one left. So I'm not defecting away from the founders. I'm defecting to the only one living, or who's going to be
Hmm.
living. So he
Right.
isn't quite as. I mean, we'll get into it. I liked Wayun 6 as a character,
Yes.
but yeah,
Very interesting.
yeah,
And I have a lot to say on this whole defecting Vorta. And we find out a little bit of Vorta lore, how the Vorta came to be as well in
yes.
this episode. So lots of information that we're given in this episode. So, but that's it. That's about all you need to really know for the synopsis. Again, the show's like 30 years old. Go watch the episode and then come back and talk to us. We'll be more than, you can tell us if we're right or whatever. So David, first time viewer, what did you think of this episode?
Yeah, I think this is a good episode. Even on Wikipedia, people seem to agree, saying it's part of. If you're gonna binge the show, this is an essential episode, which definitely makes sense with what we find out with Odo and the founders. That there's the founders are dying. And I'll quickly say this: one of the reasons I'm glad to learn that information is that way back last season, when we had Bashir with the other genetically enhanced individuals, part of the plot was is they gamed out all scenarios and they determined that the Federation was bound to lose, but they were only operating on information they could know about. So I like the idea that they didn't know that the founders were going to be in some sort of crisis that would cause them to die, and that is maybe what's going to allow the Federation to win. So I back on that episode, I was like, well, how can you predict the future with any sort of you know regularity? How are you able to do that? That's either sci-fi mumbo jumbo, or if we take them seriously, that they are able to game it out. Then how do we get out from under their prediction? So I like that this episode gives us maybe a possible answer to that question.
Right.
But that's something else entirely. I say we should start with the O'Brien and Nog part first because that's easy to
Sure.
get through, like you did. And the implications are, of course, much less than the Odo part of the story. First off, I want to say that I thought it was fun. Uh, I spoke about how the last few weeks I was reading the book on Robert Norris, the financier of the American Revolution, and this Nog, the river he talks about,
The
the
Great
Great
River.
Material Continuum, as he puts it, and all of the bargaining he does to get things going where he wants them to. That was basically Robert Morris during the Revolution, trying to keep everything floating, just like I promise you this as soon as I get a hold of that, and I promise you that when I get a hold of this. Like that's exactly what he was doing. He would have been a Ferengi, but he would have also been a much more jovial and like friendly Ferengi. He's not the uh money man like the Ferengi always come off as. It's kind of always thinking about money. It's just his philosophy would have fit nicely with the Ferengi. So I like that part. When when O'Brien was talking with Nog and he was giving him permission to do stuff, I was immediately like, "Oh, Brian,
Right.
oh, I'm
Yeah.
gonna regret
Yeah.
this.
That's a terrible idea.
What
And
are
when
you
he comes
doing?"
to him and he's like, I just need your authorization
Yeah,
code. I heard it and I was like, no, this
yeah,
he may be in Starfleet, but he's still a Ferengi. Don't give
yeah,
him
yeah.
your
I mean,
authorization code.
it's definitely one of those moments where like the character is smarter than this. What the heck is he doing?
And it's like you're playing into the fact that he is overworked, he's understaffed, and he's on a timeline. He's
Right.
on a deadline, so yeah, that's why you're able to. And he even says it. He's like, I just thought things would go much faster if I could just do it this way. When is the captain back? When is he one? Is kind of egging him into the,
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
back's up against it here, Chief. You really want to be looking over my shoulder?
But it's great because when the episode started, I thought it was going to turn into a the Ferengi. It's not going to work out. Like O'Brien's going to get his butt chewed out at the end of the episode by don't trust Nog and don't do this. But then very early on, it quickly became clear that it was going to turn into a Nog is going to juggle his way to success, and O'Brien is going to be wowed along with everybody else, kind of moment. But it was fun to go on the ride.
Well, it reminded me of another episode that we watched way back when, in the cards. That one had Nog and Cisco in it, in which Jake Cisco, he wanted to get his dad the baseball card, but they didn't have any money for it. So they started doing
Yes.
random things for people in order to get to the card. And that's when we meet up with that guy and his orders of orthodoxy. Um,
I forget that
you know,
part. What? How
yeah.
does that
So
work?
you remember the guy who thought that the reason that people died is because their cells weren't stimulated enough, so he built the
Yes.
cocoon
Yes.
to entertain your all of your cells.
Oh, yes. I remember that now.
Yeah, right. Um, so I feel like this episode is kind of a revisit of that one, and so
hmm
kind of what we're seeing here is Nog taking that whole trades and barters, everything else, and kind of elevating it, going pro with it. Because now he's got, Starfleet training and Federation connections behind him in order to make, things happen, which really works to his advantage because the people that he's dealing with, they're all part of Starfleet. So while they are, clearly bending the rules to get things done, no one is outright breaking any rules because again, they're all um, in Starfleet. They're not going to.
Right.
So what's the harm in letting some guy take the captain's desk to take some pictures? You know he's going to send it back. He's not going to
Right.
keep it or sell it like a random, Ferengi trader would, you
Right.
know. So yeah.
Yeah.
Um but yeah, this is an opportunity to show that, Nog has grown up and a way for him to make good on some of his Ferengi
Yes.
ness, I
Yeah.
guess, you know.
I love the idea that he said that the rumor is, and O'Brien's like, "What are you talking about? The rumor is."
You're doing all this based on a rumor? Well, yeah,
Yeah.
gotta have faith, Chief. Gotta have
Yeah.
faith.
Yeah, yeah, it's brilliant. Like, part of me wants to be like, this is exactly how it should be. Like, there should be some guy who like knows who wants what and how to get everything to everybody who wants what they need and needs what they want. And but then part of me is like, that's exactly how graft gets in there and people abuse the
But
system and something gets lost. And I
but
mean,
for the
he took that
Federation,
blood wine from Martok
yeah,
without asking. That's straight
yeah,
up.
yeah.
You could die for that.
But also for the Federation, it kind of makes sense that some kind of system like this would be in place because they don't have money, they don't have
No,
currency. The gold press latinum and all that stuff that exists outside of the Federation. So, in theory, what we see here is really how Federation citizens must be getting things done on a daily basis through a series of barters and trades and
right,
agreements and so forth. Because again, no one has any money. So, how did you get that nice house or that replicator or that ship or whatever? They had to have negotiated some sort of, trade-off to get those things.
right.
Um, this kind of is a great way to, like, if they could take this system and kind of expand upon it to show how things are, equated out for stuff, that would be a great way to help finally answer the question of how do people have things. Like we see, for example, Picard still maintains his family's home in France and winery and everything else.
Yeah,
But why?
right,
Why does he still have that? Why does he still have all that land and the winery and it's in his name and everything? Why? He's trading on something in order to maintain having all of that. What is it? So
yeah. That's
they
always a
don't
fun
they don't
question.
talk about it at all. And in
Yeah.
Picard, people talk about it. I've talked about it recently. Like in there's a couple of scenes where Picard leaves his massive French chateau and goes to visit an officer, a former officer that worked for him, and she's living out in the desert in what could very generously be called a futuristic double wide,
Hmm.
you know. And it's
Hmm.
just like, okay, why? Like, if why is she living that way? Why
Right.
doesn't she have a full on home and everything else? And I mean, it's like, well, that could be her personal choice. Okay, but even on the inside, when you go in there, it seems cramped. It seems less than,
Hmm.
everything's quite careworn. So it's like it's very clear there's a status here. So
Hmm.
it's like, what is it that makes her? And she was a Federation officer. She was Picard's personal assistant for a while, so it can't just be, notoriety and whatever else, because if that was the case, her being next to such a high profile individual should have granted her some sort of elevated status, which would have given her more things.
Right.
So, there's something there that we're not told, that we're not seeing.
Right.
And episodes like this kind of allude to what some of it is, but they have yet in any Trek iteration to really go into how social structure for Federation citizens and in particular Starfleet officers work. And
Right.
I think many people would like to see that.
Right. Um. Yeah. Well. So I guess we should move on to the Odo part now. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So Odo is our returning to the main storyline, the evolving Dominion storyline, and Gold Rasol. I want to start there because if you remember, all the way back in like I think it was like season 2, when the Circle was trying to take over the station. Remember
Hmm.
when Odo goes to meet with an informant and it's that Cardassian who's hiding in the shadows in the cave? I think that Cardassian he was meeting with was Gold. Rasul.
That would make sense. Okay.
And so this is the first time we've got a name put to him.
Hmm.
But they meet. He's supposed to meet him in the very much same way. He goes to a cave. He's looking for this guy. You know, it's the same way that we had seen him operate with that particular informant before. So I think that's who it was.
Right.
Although that was never really confirmed in anything.
Okay. Yeah, I don't remember that character, but that's obviously so long ago that details are going to be missed from me, of course. But um, yeah, I'll just jump to it now and say I liked Wayun 6 because he was clearly different than Wayun 5. Because Wayun 5 had a cruelty streak about him. He liked digging in and uh, poking at what's the guy's name? Damar. Yeah, Damar. He liked poking at Damar or even Gold Dukat.
Wait, yeah, I would say that it was more. We saw Wayne Five more with Ducat.
True.
Now we're seeing Wayne Seven with Demar.
Right. My point is that up until now we've always been dealing with 5, as far as we
Yes,
know, because he died about a month ago, is what we were told. And the Wayun we've known all this time has been one who definitely seemed to have a cruelty streak about him. He was very good at saying something snide, insinuating something, making comments. But Wayun 6 doesn't seem to have that about him. If he's defective, like that's what's defective. Is like he's missing that cruel streak that Wayun 5 had, which would
he
make
seems.
sense.
Yeah,
He
he was
seems
much more subservient. He was more willing
yeah,
to just, fall into that role of tell me what to do and I'll do it. You're my god. Tell
right,
me what to do and I'll do it. It didn't matter about necessarily being cruel or whatever. It was just whatever you want. I'm
right,
here.
yeah. My initial thought was that no, this is Wayne 5. This whole 6 7 nonsense isn't true. But then they're like, no, that is true because Wayne 5 died in a teleporter accident, correct?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
Damar was supposed to be on that same the
Same
same,
transporter pad,
and
yet
he
last
had
minute he
got
was
called
called
away.
away.
Yeah,
Uh-huh. Sure.
yeah, brilliant scheme, brilliant plan. Um,
Which just
but
goes to
yeah,
show you, I mean, like, the Cardassians, they're not smart. They may be efficient when it comes to, like, covering up their tracks on stuff, because clearly everybody knows that Damar did this thing, but there's
yeah,
just not
everything
enough
except the actual
evidence.
evidence. Yeah, is
Right.
there.
Not enough evidence,
Circumstantial
so
evidence
yeah,
abounds, but
yeah. And even Demar doesn't deny it. He's just like, he's smirking at him the whole time when they're talking about it. Oh,
yeah,
I was called away. Urgent business. You know how it goes. It's like just tell him, yeah, I shot him. That's what basically what you're doing with
yeah,
your smirking. Come
yeah.
on, who's
I
gonna
got
have some
tired of that
canar?
one.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
just having some canar, man. I got called away. No
that is
big
so.
deal.
Yeah, I love when he was trying to offer that. Like he was trying. Like this will finally be the way you and I can finally get my hooks in on if
Right.
you would just drink some Kanar. But nope,
He's
even
even trying
seven
to
won't do it.
Yeah, he's even trying to like talk to him about, yeah, you're I like you a lot better. You're much more ruthless and evil than, the other one. Yeah, now that you've seen my way of calling this, have some Canar too. Let's solidify just how much we're alike here. Drink
Right,
this.
right.
And of course, Wayne turns it down. So yeah, the Damar Wayun dynamic is very interesting because if you can remember, when the Dominion was first um brought in as a partner to the Cardassians, Damar didn't like them. He didn't trust them. He
Right.
was, very much the fly in um, Gul Dukat's ear
Hmm.
about not trusting them and
Right.
when are we gonna, throw them off and kind of do this on our own. To
Right.
which Ducat was always like, there's a time and a place for that, but it's not yet. It's not
Right.
yet. So yeah, it's yeah, very interesting that now he's just so cozy with him, so buddy buddy with him.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, but the idea that William 6 is different was curious because I guess the question really comes down to like at what point are they cloning the way like when they do the cloning, are they cloning adults? Are they cloning them as children? Like it's just a line of them. What do you think? Is there an explanation
I
for
think that they don't explain it, but I think they're flash cloned. I think to use a term, I know that we don't necessarily have a meaning for that, but basically, I think that it's just they're pretty much already to a certain level of maturity,
Hmm.
and then when it's time for one to come out of the incubator, basically they just switch it on and let it finish the process, and then
Mm,
there you go, you've got that way they don't suffer any downtime, because remember the Vorta are like the officiators, the logicians for the Dominion.
right.
So if you have to wait months to grow one
Yeah, they
after
might.
one's died, that would take far too long. So
Yeah,
it would make sense that you would go from, like, Wayun 5 died, so within a matter of
a
maybe a couple
day.
hours, yeah,
Yeah,
you would have the
a
next one up and
working.
running.
Yeah,
And
I
heck,
guess what I'm getting at though
we
is
even
like,
see it
do
here because we got Wayun 5 died, Wayun 6 has now been deemed defective, and Wayun 7 is already up and running,
right.
and doing things. So yeah.
I guess what I'm getting at though is that, do you think that all of the Wayuns were like in a lab? All of them came out of a, like there were like they came out like a dozen eggs. There were a dozen of them that came out of the factory all at once, or do you think that they waited for like a child to grow up to an adult and then they flash
Oh,
froze
no,
like
no,
six of
no,
them?
no, no, no.
Or
I don't think that Wayun ever existed that was like that. Like I understand what you're saying now. Um, basically, like I'm the only me, right?
right,
And so let's just say that right now someone took my, DNA and decided to mass, produce like 40 Perry clones, right?
right,
But
right,
then instead of having them all active, they would get them all to my approximate level of maturity and then just hold them there until
right.
something happened to me and I died or whatever it is. And then they would just pick one
Here's
and drop
yeah.
them out, and they would just resume whatever it was I was doing as me. And I
Well,
think
I guess
that's how they did it.
what I'm really getting at though is like, if we think that Wayun Six is different, do we think that that's because he, like if he was a batch like a dozen eggs and he was just an odd egg out in that sense, and he was just, instead of it being all 12 white eggs, we got a brown one in there, or is it that like maybe the original Wayun, they got a clone of
Oh,
of him at some point, and his mental state was somehow different,
oh
which
no.
caused the new one to be different. Yeah.
Well, I think that they probably run into the situation where, like, the original Wayoon probably existed. I mean, we know the Dominion is old, you know. The original Wayoon probably existed. Who knows how long ago? Because we don't know how long a Vorta lives. We haven't really been told that. So,
Hmm.
he could be the original Wayoon could have died a couple thousand years ago for all we know, and
Right.
they've just been cloning him based off of that one trace that they've had, right? But through the cloning process, and you're doing a clone of a clone or whatever that is, there, time, everything degrades. So
Right.
it's possible that despite their meticulous cloning process, the core sample they've been using has begun to show some wear and tear. And I mean, even Wayun himself says that, it's possible over time, clones have been known to become defective. He's like, never has it happened in the Wayoon line, but it has been known to happen.
Right.
So again, we can kind of take that with a grain of salt there, and just, again, their cloning process is clearly quite advanced, but it's not perfect. So it's
Right.
possible that somewhere along the way, the sample that they used to make this particular clone was damaged.
Right.
And that's why we've got this one who's a little bit different than the others.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Well, that always leaves. I guess it'll be fun to. I mean, I imagine we're not going to see any more Wayuns, but it'd be fun to think of like, we just need to like bump off a couple until we get to one we like.
There you go.
And how many do they have in the back room? If we can't get back to the wormhole, do they have only like two
Yeah,
more
that's
left?
that's
If
true. I mean, we don't know where they store the source code for Wayoon, basically. So
yeah,
who
yeah,
knows?
that's a good question too. Yeah, do they make him from scratch on the when they need him? Like there's like a blueprint for him. Yeah. Oh
I
well.
think
Okay.
that's I think that's more along how it goes. I think their process is more like a clone of a clone of a clone of a clone. So like we had the original Wayun, and then Wayun 2 would have
Right.
been, or I guess Wayun 0 is the original. And then you have Wayun 1, who would have been the first clone. Then Wayun 2, who's the second clone, who may have been based off the original material if it was still available. If
Right.
not, he could have been based off of, because I mean they're probably also tweaking the process, right? We need this Wayun to be more
Ooh.
subservient, more ruthless, more
Ah.
calculating, smarter, whatever it is. So they're changing, tweaking the DNA each time they clone them to make them suit whatever the need is for that particular time period. All that changing
Right.
could, have all kinds of unintended effects. So then we come to Wayun 6, who is the embodiment of however many years of tweaking and fine tuning of the cloning process.
Right.
Maybe he is what the perfect embodiment of Wayun was supposed to be,
Right.
for all we know. And then someone was like, "Nah, he's too much of a pacifist. We never had a pacifist Wayun before." And isn't that funny that we got a pacifist in wartime?
Yeah.
How did that happen? Because the first Wayun that we ever saw, the other one that we've been dealing with, he was born in the Gamma Quadrant, where
Yeah.
all the fighting stuff they had been doing, for with other groups. Now they're in a full-on war on
Right.
the other side of the galaxy with this group that talks about peace.
Right.
So now he's bred from that, and he also suddenly is talking peace.
Yeah.
Something to that, I think.
Interesting. Hmm. Are you
Yeah.
suggesting that you think someone's intentionally changing that, or that it's somehow just like the
Well,
nature of things are causing him to come out that way?
well, I think that, so we know that the founders breed Jem'Hadar kind of the same way through cloning and rapid aging.
Right.
And we know that they specifically tailor them genetically to go up against whatever the enemy is, right, that they're going to be facing. So we know that when we first encountered the Jem'Hadar anyway, they were all bred to live and fight in the Gamma Quadrant. And we saw the episode where they had bred new Jem'Hadar. These ones were specifically bred to live and fight people in the Alpha Quadrant.
Right.
And
That's
so,
true.
and we know they were different. So if they do that for the Jem'Hadar, why wouldn't they also do it for their strategists, for their planners, their processors as well? You're
Right.
dealing with a new enemy, you're dealing with a new environment. Why wouldn't you want someone also ideally suited and adapted to said environment? So whatever samples they use, they start with obviously something very familiar and basic, the
Right.
basic Jem'Hadar, the basic Vorta, and then they input whatever based upon the races that they're going to be encountering. And all of a sudden, for the first time ever, we've got Jem'Hadar that have been rebelling and
Yeah.
are immune to Ketracel White, and come out of the incubation chamber early. All these things we've seen in the Jem'Hadar line so far. And now we've had, for the first time, they've had to clone Wayun, because again, no Wayun has died until now.
Right.
And all of a sudden, the very first Wayun to be an amalgam of whatever it was they took from the Alpha Quadrant is speaking about peace.
Diplomacy and diplomacy. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. I like your theory. I like your theory. Um, how would you explain seven then? You think he's got more in
I
common with six than we realize?
No, I think that Seven is basically someone, they kind of
They
like
return
anybody.
him.
They recognize that to them it was a mistake. We created Wayne Six. He was not what we were looking for. He's too much of a pacifist. We made too many changes. Screw that. We're not going to do that again. Take all those changes out. Give us the ruthless one back,
Right.
and that's what they got. That's why
Right.
we have, and he's even more so because they were so, kind of the overcorrection, right? They're
Hmm.
so adamant about making sure they don't produce another pacifist that we've overcorrected, and now he's so ruthless he's willing to override rule number one:
Yeah.
don't harm a
Kill.
founder.
Yeah. And even lie to a founder when she
Lie to a
comes and
founder. He
asks
was
you.
willing to lie
Yeah.
to a founder.
That's an interesting question. You think they've lied before? Like they would lie to save themselves, but they still worship them? Or do you think that truly is a difference? That he, before Wei Yun would never have lied, but this one will.
Well, I think that it's definitely a change because we never saw the other Wayne, Wayne 5, never saw him lie. We only
True.
ever saw him show that kind of more ruthless side when he dealt with anybody that was not a founder,
That's
you
right.
know.
Whenever a founder
Um,
showed up, he was suddenly very deferential. Yep.
very, very deferential, Um, did whatever they said and would, snap on anybody who questioned the founder in his presence.
Mhm.
Whereas in this instance, he lied to her face
Right.
twice.
Mhm.
She asked him, who were they chasing? And he was like, it's just a shuttle. We found a shuttle. Well, actually, it's Damar who lied, but he didn't
Didn't
correct
correct.
Damar.
Yeah.
And then when she asked, what's the situation with Wayoon 6, he was like,
We're
it'll be
looking for
handled
him.
soon. Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
we'll have it soon. Not telling her we know precisely where he is and who he's with and what he's doing.
Well, and it's not
Um,
even that they could have just said, "Yeah, Wayoon Six is on this runabout." Oh, who came on the runabout to get him? Oh, no one important. But maybe they didn't want to risk her getting curious and looking up the details. And
I mean, that's exactly it. It's a lie of omission because
yeah,
because if they had told her that they were chasing down a Federation runabout because Wayoon 6 was on it, she would immediately want to know who was on said shuttle.
right,
And also, they had no way of guaranteeing that she wouldn't want to capture the shuttle anyway. So they couldn't lie to her and say, oh, he's on a shuttle with a bunch of humans. And then
right,
she's like, capture the shuttle. And then they have to now capture it, and it's Odo on board. And now
right,
he's lied to her twice.
right,
So yeah, he's telling several lies here to
right.
cover up for what he's doing.
Yeah.
So
All right.
yeah, he's
Curious.
definitely outside of the line on what we've seen of Wayoon up to now.
Right. Ah, interesting. Um, so I have to go else.
So
We didn't talk, or you did when in your recap, you didn't mention the origin story of
yes,
the.
the origin story of
Yeah,
the Vorta,
yeah.
which so Wayoon 6 tells the story to Odo about how way back when countless years, thousands of years, millennia ago, whatever it was, back when the Vorta were little more than hairy
Mm.
primates living in caves, there was a changeling who was being pursued by other people, solids of some kind, other humanoid races. Odo asked why were they pursuing him, and he's like, "Who cares? The guy's a changeling. They weren't. They were, as they feared him.
Hmm.
So they've chased this changeling basically to the edge of civilization, and he's discovered by these ignorant but benevolent early proto Vorta, and they take him in and hide him and care for him while the raging horde of you know torches and pitchfork humanoids storm on past. um, because of their kindness, the changeling promises that one day the Vorta will be elevated to a place of importance and note in the coming empire that
Yeah.
the changelings are going to build. And basically, he goes off after the group has passed, the marauding horde has passed. He goes off, but then eventually comes back and does reward these Vorta by elevating them and changing them
Hmm.
from these, again,
Ape-like beings. Yeah.
ape-like cave dwellers to the Vorta that we know and see today. So they've been manipulating the Vorta genetic code forever.
Right.
We have no idea what their natural evolution would have made them be, but they've now been changed to always serve and always be loyal to the founders, and they're grateful for it. And Odo,
They see them as
is
gods. Yeah.
yeah, and Odo's kind of impressed by the story. He's like, I mean, it would have, if it's true, it would have demonstrated that his people had some kind of, kindness and an ability to, hold to their word or
Right.
whatever. But I didn't take it that way. I didn't take this as a story of them being kind because they returned and honored this promise of elevating the Vorta. I mean, did they really elevate them? They altered them forever and turned them into their slaves.
Yeah.
Like, That's
Very
not
willing
kind at
and
all.
obedient slaves, but yes, slaves
Yeah.
nonetheless. Yeah.
But I mean, how willing and obedient are they? Do we really
Yeah.
know? Because
One's running away, one's lying to her face. Yeah.
but not only that, but I mean, they forever changed their genetic structure and their ability to think and reason on their own. Like all of this has now been forever genetically modified. We don't know what they really would have thought had they naturally evolved to a certain point and then encountered said changeling or whatever and worked
Yeah.
with them in true partnership. They were as he's almost basically what he intimates, they were stupid cave dwellers. It's kind of like the equivalent would be someone running into a caveman troglodyte now or way back when, and because they gave him food they picked him up and you know again irrevocably genetically modified him and said, hey, you're good to go now.
Right.
You can't really say what they're going to be or whatever. So, yeah, I didn't really take that as, oh, this was such a wonderful thing that they did. It was, hey, we need slaves, and you guys are just subservient enough and non threatening enough that we're going to take you and we're going to keep you that way, but we're going to make you stronger and faster to greater service.
Gotcha. To be, I mean, that's it's crazy that like the changelings might have already had that technology in place, or else they somehow waited some sort of period of time and came back for the Vorta to fulfill that promise, which I guess the changelings could do because they can pass on memories to each other. Um, it's just crazy to think that I don't know. I guess I'm getting at is part of me wonders if the story is true, as Odo kind of questions, like how much of this is really just indoctrination to keep you guys in line,
Right.
versus maybe the Vorta were an advanced race that was conquered like all the others, and they
Maybe.
had genetic, you know, editing technology as a part of their culture already, a part of their technology, and when the changelings captured them, they just used it on the Vorta to their own ends, and then told them some sob story about you guys were a bunch of ape-like creatures that we raised up to what you are now, totally usurping the true history of the Vorta or something. But who knows?
I mean, just think of it like because I thought about, frame it in from our standpoint, like with human society as it is today. How would you react if all of a sudden the heavens opened and a giant spaceship dropped down, and this alien came out who looked like us, but just enough different that you could clearly say was alien, right? And they were
Right.
like, "Hey, we've been not only watching you, but we've been messing with your genetic code ever since you guys were primordial ooze. We've been
Yeah.
tweaking you and fine tuning you just to get you to this point because, well, there's a war on, and there's 9 billion of you here on this planet ready made. And we've got these custom suits you need you to put on, and we're going to ship you all off to the front lines of this military campaign that you've never heard of, you know nothing about, but hey, you owe us because the whole reason that y'all were able to become 9 billion strong is we've been shielding your planet and protecting you guys and shepherding you and watching over you all this time because we wanted you guys
Right.
to build up to this level so we can use you." And
Right.
we would, and I mean, they would expect us to be like, thank you so much. But we would really be like, get the hell out of here. We're not doing that.
Yeah.
We're not going to go
Yeah.
fight your war.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all a bit strange. I don't know. I mean, you're the expert here, so I guess they never answered those questions. At least
No, they
you haven't
they never
mentioned
did. At
it.
least not to my satisfaction. It's
Right.
never answered. And I mean, it's one of those things where they kind of give you like, this is something we hear about from other races too. Like, remember Hanique when her people came through the wormhole, and she talked about how,
Mm,
there was always this threat of there was this group, the Dominion, that
right.
loomed out there, and Hanique's people were already being oppressed,
Right.
but then her oppressors were wiped out by the Dominion when the
Right.
Dominion showed up. So
Right.
the Dominion has existed for obviously quite a long time,
Right.
and has been influencing countless civilizations for not just generations but potentially eons. We
Right.
really just don't know how long they've been in existence.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
well, any other thoughts on this entertaining and very intriguing episode? I mean, we get more out of this one than I thought that we ever would have for sure.
Yeah, well, we still have at least two things that we should talk about. But I'll go back first to the one that I forgot to mention. We were talking about the O'Brien storyline. When Cisco shows up to O'Brien, and O'Brien initially says it's going to take 3 weeks to get the part needed. You said 1 week, but if I remember correctly, it was 3 weeks,
Yeah, he did say it was 3 weeks.
and he was like, "I need it in 3 days," and I was like, okay, you can yell at O'Brien as much as you want. Like, I don't know what you're doing about this. You're gonna do it in 3 days or else nonsense. Like, I wasn't very happy with Cisco is what I'm getting at. I was like,
It's one of those situations where, like, again, it makes me wonder exactly how does Starfleet work?
yeah,
Because if you need something that bad and that soon,
right,
you are the captain.
yeah, who, yeah,
No one's authority supersedes yours beyond an
yeah,
admiral. Call up that stupid quartermaster and you tell him, "Hey, get that part here now,"
yeah.
and
When
be
he's
done
like,
with it.
when he says to O'Brien, it's like that's your problem. Sounds like a you problem. I was like,
Yeah,
when has Cisco ever been like that's a you problem to anybody?
right.
um, I mean, maybe to what's her face, the political or the religious
Kai
leader.
Wynn.
Kai
Yeah.
Wynn definitely. But anyway, point
But
is
she's outside of his chain of command, so it makes perfect
right,
sense. I'm not going to intervene on your turf there, Kai. You
yeah,
do it. But this is Starfleet. This is Federation stuff. You
right.
need tech for your ship,
Oh,
Captain.
and here's the other thing too. He wanted to go on a patrol. Ooh, a patrol. Like if he was like, no, there's a major mission happening in 3 days, and the mission is crucial to our being a part of the fleet. We need to be there. I need you to be on it. You have 3 days. I could understand his urgency, but when he's like, I want to go on patrol in my favorite ship, the one I personally made, I was like, Cisco, I think you need to chill your jets. But then I remembered, at the end of the episode when he says, how many hours is it gonna take for you to install it? And he was like 8. And he says, you have 2. I did remember the TNG episode where we had the original Scotty show up and talk with Jordy,
LaForge.
and he
Yeah.
was like, "Yeah, tell them something uh, super long, so that when you outdo yourself, you look like a miracle worker." So part of me wondered if that was actually part of what was going on. The whole, give them a ridiculous timetable so that when you exceed it, you actually look great. I feel like in the first instance, that's not what it was because O'Brien at no point is like, "Oh yeah, I was just giving myself some room to work with." He, but he never gets super upset either. He's just like, "Well, if I get chewed out, I get chewed out." I don't know. It
So
was just weird. I just felt like the dynamic was off
so
on
this is
that
something that
part.
we've seen a couple of times in Trek, and Lower Decks actually put a name to it. It's called buffer time. So buffer time is the time, where they give you an assignment. You know how long it will really take. But it's like basically the joke is once you become a senior officer, all concepts of time to do a task go out the window. So when your lower decks people are given an assignment or whatever, they add buffer time so that gives them time to, you know, take a nap, go get food,
Right,
do all these other things throughout their day while getting the task done. So
right,
it's like, oh, this is going to take you 8 hours. And so, like us, like a full working shift to do one thing,
right,
really?
right,
No, but that will give you time to go play darts with Julian in Quarks and
right,
maybe have a couple of pints of beer and then go sleep it off, in your quarters with your wife before you finally come back and 2 hours knock the job out, right?
right, right,
And so yeah, what we see here is basically the captain being like, I'm not an idiot. I know how long things really take, and whereas ordinarily I'd be okay with your buffer time, this is something I really want to do, so I'm effectively pulling rank and I'm
right,
pulling your buffer time.
right.
So do the job, and then
Yeah,
you can do whatever you want afterwards, but I'm first.
right, right.
So
I like that. That definitely fits the idea of give yourself time to make a miracle. Look like you're doing a miracle. You're a miracle worker.
It's like,
Um,
are you really a miracle worker or are you just antisocial? Like that's how you really gotta look at it. Like, are you really a miracle worker or you just not have any friends? Like, what's
right.
going on here? Like, oh, wait a second. We know this job should take 8 hours, but man, Scotty, our miracle worker, he keeps knocking it out 2 hours, 1 hour, 30 minutes. Like, why is he so good at this? Well, we know that Scotty was notoriously a workaholic and an alcoholic. So that's why he was able to get everything done.
Right.
He had no problem with sleeping in the engineering department. He only ever the only thing we ever saw him reading was ship technical manuals
Right.
and drinking. So yeah,
Yeah.
no
I do
wonder he
three.
was the miracle worker. He
I
he
do
never
three
went
things.
anywhere.
I do them all at the same time, and I do them well.
Yes. And then when I'm done, I'm exhausted and I take several shots and go to sleep to wake
Yeah.
up in 3 hours and start the thing all over again.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to say that because right when Cisco shows up, he's only in the episode twice, but when he first shows up, Quark is complaining to O'Brien. He says, "I'm gonna give a formal notice to Captain Cisco," and Captain Cisco off screen as he walks on screen says, "Put it in writing, Quark."
Basically cutting the jib of his sail there. Yeah. Oh man. You
Great
thought you were
comeback.
you thought you were leveling a threat. Now the
Yeah.
guy doesn't care. The man himself basically has told you, I don't care.
Great moment.
Oh
But
yeah.
yeah, the other thing to talk about is at the very end of the episode, we get Kira and Odo talking about their faith, basically. You know, Odo being a god to the Wayun and the Vorta, and she treats the prophets as gods, and how it's her faith that gets her through. Um, an interesting concept. I mean, as the Wikipedia page here talks about, basically, I guess Roddenberry kind of had a low opinion about religious belief, and so that kind of came out in some of the earlier shows. But this,
I wouldn't even say kind of came out. It definitely came out. And
okay.
I
Well, I
wouldn't
was trying
and I
to
oh,
be,
yeah, I
yeah,
understand. And I wouldn't even say low opinion. The guy didn't like religion. Like it to me, it goes beyond um it goes beyond being an atheist to the
yeah,
point of he was
uh-huh.
just anti-religion. Like
Right,
I
right,
would never say that I'm anti-religion. I very much believe people have the right to, believe, worship, and practice that
right,
however they want to,
right.
without any interference from me. Roddenberry, on the other hand, was more like, yeah, our religion, get rid of it.
Gotcha.
So now, of course, in formulating this show and it moving through its various iterations and trying to maintain a little bit of mainstream popularity, they really had to kind of shy away from that. So
Right,
it's basically like, we're not going to talk about it.
right,
Roddenberry very much wanted there to be, t- talks about those
right,
things to certain degrees, and it was just like, we're really not going to do that. Deep Space Nine is the first show that really tries to um, thrust us into both this intersection of a secular life with a deeply religious one, which we see with the Bajoran people, and
right,
we see how that works for all the people. Like Cisco being a person who again is from Starfleet, but then becomes a religious figure. Kira with her faith being tested by discovering that this faith that she had in the prophets, they're they're legit. They're real.
mhm,
Like this all, it's not just stories that she's heard or anything like that, and so
right.
forth. So yeah, it's a lot that this show gives us that we've never had another Trek.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. The reason I bring it up is because, as someone who does take his faith seriously, the idea. So there's always the concept of what does it mean to have faith, and most people like the most common misperception about what does it mean to have faith is the idea of blind faith, where you just basically put a wool over your eyes, put a handkerchief over your eyes, close your eyes, hand over your eyes, and you just step out blindly into whatever. And that's not what faith is supposed to be. It's supposed to be that you, especially if you know a person, you trust in their character, in that they will react in predictable ways. Like, I know that my parents love me, and so if I called them and say I need help, I can trust that they'll be there. That's a very generic way of saying it, but the idea is you're not blindly throwing yourself out in there into the wilderness and then just closing your eyes, going blah blah blah, blah and you're just hoping for the best, which is how some people treat things. Like, for example, I would say that people who don't take medical advancements and medical technology seriously and then say, I'm going to let God save me, is an example of using faith blindly. You're going to blindly trust that God's going to save you when you have, like, if God is a good God and he has a material universe that makes sense, and that means that, medicine makes sense, then it's God working in that way to help you. He's not uh liking that there, right?
I 100% agree. Like
Yeah,
I've tried to have that conversation with people before, where they've said something along those lines, and I'm gonna put it to my faith. I'm gonna trust in God. I'm gonna whatever. And I've again said something very similar. If you believe that God exists and that He created everything in the world, and that all we are is offshoots of His creation, and He guides us and so forth and so on, then why wouldn't you let the scientist who created the vaccine that or the cure or whatever it is that could save yourself, your child, and whatever? Why can't you say that it's God's will to take
use
it?
that. Right,
It's right there. It's ready made for you. All you have to do is stick out your arm,
right,
and you're saying that, like, what do you need to make that last leap of a connection?
right,
Here's the thing that used to kill people before.
right,
Now we have a known bona fide cure for it. All you have to do is stand in line and put your arm out, and you're going to tell me no? Like
right.
I never could fathom that.
Yeah.
So yeah, what you
Well,
said makes a lot of sense to me.
so I have two things to follow up with that, but the first I'll say before I even say those two things is that that's a it's a perfect example of someone trying to overprove their faith. I'm gonna trust so hard that I'm gonna close my eyes and jump and see what happens. It's like, no, hold on, don't do that. Anyway, but the other reason I was bringing it up is because, um, oh gosh, I was losing my train of thought. I think the faith that the material there's a story, there's a joke that you may have heard before. I think it was told in the Will Smith movie The Pursuit of Happiness. I think his son Jaden Smith, who was in the movie, tells it to his dad in the movie, but you've probably heard it before. But it's a perfect example of what I'm saying. There's a guy, there's a flood, he's drowning, he needs help, he needs to be rescued. And the boat
Yes.
comes along, and the guys in the boat say, "Jump on, we're gonna save you." And he says, "No, I'm
Come on,
trusting in
loser, we're
God."
getting out of here.
Yeah,
God's
nope,
got it.
God's gonna save me. And then another boat comes, and they're gonna save him. And then a helicopter comes, and he says, "Nope, God's gonna save me." And then he drowns, and he ends up going to Saint Peter at the pearly gates, and he says, "Well, why didn't God save me?" And Saint Peter's like, "We sent you a boat, we sent you a helicopter. Like, what do you want?"
Yeah.
So
They did that in that movie, but they also did that in an episode of The West Wing, much more
yeah,
of a serious morality effect. And there was a man who was on death row, and he was up for it was his time for execution, and
right,
they were trying to get a stay of execution. And at some point, President Bartlett, he asks different people throughout the day what they think, and all of them tell him no, but for different reasons why they
right,
shouldn't do it. And so one, it's like I think he asks a visiting rabbi what he thinks, and the rabbi tells him why he shouldn't do it. And then he asks a deaf woman who was there, and she also told him why he shouldn't do it. And then he asked someone else, like uh, I don't know, a secretary or a teacher, somebody that was there like visiting, and asks them, and they again tell him no, why they don't think that he should kill this person and whatever. But
mhm,
at the end of the day, he goes through with it, and the guy gets executed. And so then he's having this kind of crisis of faith moment, and his old priest comes up to counsel him, and
mhm,
he's talking to the priest about it. And the priest, the same thing, he was like, "You had a rabbi, a Jesuit, whatever, and a deaf person all tell you not to do this thing. What makes you think that wasn't God telling you not to do it? You had all these different walks of faith, life, creed, experience, and whatever else telling you no, and you still did the thing. So what's wrong with you?" And
right.
and that's kind of how the episode ends. But
Yeah, then he
yeah,
like asked for like confession for at the end of
yeah,
that episode. And I think
yeah.
I don't remember all the details of that one, but I think I remember that like the final scene of that episode is him. like sitting
being
down
like,
for dinner.
why? Because he's like, I prayed, I asked, I asked for help, I asked for guidance, and I didn't get any, and I had to
Right.
let this thing happen. And the priest was like, no, you did, you just didn't listen, you
Right.
know.
Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah,
and the other thing I wanted to say, and I don't mean to interrupt you, I just want to follow up with what I was saying. So me and some friends and I were reading a book called "Misreading Scripture with Western Eyes." It's the idea is that not only is translation from a foreign language into English going to cause some misunderstandings, but if you consider some of the uh, culture of the Old and New Testament, and that it has sometimes more similarities with other cultures, especially over in the East, the Middle East and otherwise. If you go to those cultures, you'll sometimes learn some things in comparison to Western cultures. And one of the things that the book pointed out, going back to medicine, is that when someone would call him and ask him, "Hey, there's someone dying," and he would go, and it would turn out they just have a fever and they just needed some like penicillin and they just needed a quick pill, and he would give them a quick pill, and he wouldn't like sit and pray with the people, and so the people would think that he actually had low faith, which is he found that very interesting because he was like, no, I have like faith in the material, like scientific world that I know what to do, but he realized that as a believer, by knowing the mechanics of the universe, that has in some ways caused him to lose faith, as in like thanking God or just praying or just doing some of the more traditional religious behaviors because, oh, science has it figured out. While it can be true that the pill will help solve the problem, as someone who takes his faith seriously and who is trying to share his faith with others, he is trying to remember to express his thankfulness to God for other people, even while using the material answer to a solution. Thank you, God, for the material solution. So yeah, I just found that very interesting because the point of this episode at the finale is that Kira says, "I trust the founders. I'm sorry, I trust the prophets as gods. I have faith in them as gods." And my whole thing from the beginning of the show, as you've heard me say multiple times, is kind of this like awkward, like how do I appreciate the show's approach to religious topics? And the real thing that always is just the thing that like always like I'm a little concerned about is like, because like Odo is just a guy, right? Like
hmm.
anyone who would treat him like a god, we know that they're making a mistake because we know that Odo is fallible. He's just a dude. Um, but the prophets are different. They are still outside of the regular abilities of anyone to do anything in terms of the material, what we can do. We can't be like changelings and change ourselves into new forms, but we also can't move through time. Like the idea that we can move through time seems like even harder to do than maybe having changeling abilities, though
Yeah, right.
honestly,
It'd be much easier for us to change our shape than it would be to move through time at this point.
right, even though in science fiction we've seen plenty of times that sci-fi travel through time is very common even on Star Trek. But anyway, point
Oh
being,
yeah. That's a whole
anyway,
other rabbit hole, but yeah.
yeah, just this the thing I'm trying to get at is that as a Christian, the reason we trust God in the ways different than the show is presenting these godlike beings is that God is outside of time and space. He is incorporeal. He is truly, we can't ever get to his level. Like I can imagine humanity in Star Trek universe at some point being able to communicate on the level of the prophets just millions of years into the future. Like you become Q like
Oh, I see.
beings.
I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. So, um, yeah, you're basically saying that that is a level of evolution that humans
Right.
have not reached.
Right.
Whereas from Kira's standpoint, um, her view of the prophets would be more in line with how you would view God now. That it, the prophets exist on a whole other thing that she will never ever, reach or attain or understand or whatever. That's
Right.
why her faith is so strong, because this is something that is totally completely separate from her existence. There's no level of evolution she will ever be on that will put her on par with the prophets.
On a personal level, yes, but my follow up to that is that if humanity and Bajorans and everyone else is quote unquote evolving to a higher plane of existence, my point is that, like, let me put it this way: children become adults like their parents are adults, and one of the things that's kind of hard about being a child is realizing that your parents are fallible. But when you're a child, you might think of them as godlike in a sense. You obey them when they say do this or that. You think that they're always wise, etc. But when you grow up, you realize that they are just people like you are. My point is that the prophets might seem godlike because they are adults to the children that are the
Hmm.
Bajorans. And my only concern about the way they're presenting religion in that sense is that the Christian God the Father, he is supposed to be the ultimate father to humanity, as in he is always above in some capacity. There's always
So
something. We're
I
always
see.
reaching up continually. But I may have spoken a lot about that. I don't know
Well,
if
no,
I've overspoken.
so I think that I understand what you're saying, but I think that the issue ultimately is going to be that when dealing with the prophets, we have to remember that we are dealing with something that the intention of the writers of the show, they were trying to give us something that was ambiguous.
Right,
Um, from the Federation standpoint, these, while we don't understand the prophets, we recognize them as an alien entity.
right,
We're not going to equate them as gods. They're just different from us, and
right,
that's the Federation Starfleet way of dealing with them. They're
right,
not truly gods. They're just different kinds of aliens. Like Q isn't a god, but he's a different type of alien. However, everything that Q does, there's no reason not to also equate him with God. I mean, with the
right.
literal snap of his fingers,
You
he
can do
can
just
do
anything.
anything. We have yet
Yeah,
to see a limit on what Q can do,
right,
you know? So yeah, there's when it comes to addressing things like this, I think what we were seeing here is the writers and showrunners, they were trying to give us something that, it definitely could fall either way,
hmm,
but they also had the added stress of we can't let this sound like any particular major religion because
true.
we don't want to offend anyone.
Right,
And
yeah,
if as much as it's already going to offend people, because we obviously have to draw from something, we have to
right,
draw from some kind of source material.
right,
People are going to watch this and say, "Oh, that's just like the Christian faith or the Buddhist faith or the Jewish faith, the Taoist faith, the Muslim faith, whatever." They're going to say those things because they're going to see parallels.
right,
But that's the best that we can do to make this both believable and personable enough to people to make them want to watch it without actually saying this is definitely that, this is definitely that one,
right.
and kind of boxing themselves in there.
Yeah,
So, and I think they, by the end of the show, I think they do a good enough job of keeping a lot of that ambiguity to stop you from being able to like nail anything down.
right.
But the problem with being successful on that end means it's going to lead to a lot of like problems and conflicts like what you're talking about now.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I just want to be very clear. What I'm doing and what I love to do in life in general, this is something I know about myself, is I like where's the Venn diagram? Where's the outside the Venn diagram? Where's the crossover? Where's the outside? And so as I compare what I believe versus how the show is presenting a faith, a belief system, a religion, where does it cross over? Where does it make sense? Where do the differences help explain the differences? Like the fact that this is different explains what I believe better in some ways by
mhm.
being a contrast that I can point to. So that's real fun to do. I love doing that kind of stuff. Like compare this, compare that, contrast it, take notes. I love that kind of thing. So
Well, before this turns into a whole other kind of conversation, I think we should
yeah, no, I'm
end
done.
this
I'm done.
here
I'm done. Trust
now.
me.
Because I was like, because there's certain things that you said here, I was like, you know what, I like that, but yeah, um, yeah. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and end this here. A great episode, clearly.
Yeah,
Almost seems like there wasn't much here initially, but then, of course, as always, start talking about it, dug into a lot of things, found some really interesting nuggets here. So,
yeah,
with that being said, yeah, that's going to do it for us here on this episode of the Fire Caves. Come back to us next week, of course. I was going to think, was there any? new Trek update. No, there's not. But there is a thing I wanted to share really quick. It's the Expanse related. If you watch the show, if you've read the books, any of that, then you are aware of a character named Dr. Elvi Okoye, who was is the lead scientist who we see when they land on Illis in the TV show. She kind of helps hold and figure some
Season
things
4.
out. Yeah, and then in the books, she's kind of our main voice for the investigation of the protomolecule and what it does. And in this most recent book, book 8, she has a really big part in a lot of that. I bring her up because the actress who played Elvie, her name is Lindy Greenwood, was recently online. She's given several different interviews. She has been sharing the fact that she is going through a cancer battle right now. She's sharing all of that stuff. You can find it. She's got a great blog and um, YouTube video out right now where she talks all about her diagnosis and going through chemo and her whole situation. And if you know anybody who's gone through cancer or anything like that, you know just how hard that struggle can be. And so I find it particularly remarkable when people are willing to share such a very personal and intimate thing about themselves, especially when that apparently is causing a great deal of pain for her too. So if you wanted to show her support or anything like that, I strongly suggest you go and check out her blog, check out her video. Always leave words of encouragement for stuff like that. At least I try to, and I'm always supporting the people from The Expanse because I love that show so much. And so yeah, just wanted to throw that out there. Go check it out. I'm gonna go. I think they put a new update out for her. Um, I think it's like 3 or 4 days ago, and I haven't seen it yet. So, yeah, just want to let y'all know that's what's going on. And if you have any interest at all, go check her out. Again, her name is Lindy Greenwood. She played Dr. Elvie Okoye on The Expanse.
Gotcha.
All right, guys, that is it for us on this episode. Come back again next week, and until next week, take care of yourself.